Good morning. It's Wednesdays. I'm Wayne. Welcome to Wednesdays with Wayne. The first thing I want to do before we get started is thank you for your time as always. And I introduce myself every time the same way because I'm appreciative. And a friend of mine told me a long time ago, he said the most valuable thing anyone can give you is their time. So I just want to begin, as always, by thanking you for your time. So thank you for showing up. We're going to do something really, really different today. And in spite of the world is in chaos, there's massive disruption. We have this COVID epidemic. We've got riots around the world. We've got protesters. It's just disruptive and chaotic. And as I said before, the world is designed to change. And humans are designed to change. I don't know about you, but like one of my mentors, Bucky Fuller, and we're going to go into this book a little bit. And I'll tell you why, because when I was a kid, as Bucky described, all human beings born naked, helpless, curious, inquisitive, learning via trial and error, stumbling, bumbling, and fumbling their way through the learning process. I remember as a kid, I was always very curious. I don't know where it comes from. I guess it's just innate. Nonetheless, I've always been that way. I'm still that way today. And, they say, there's a saying, curiosity killed the cat. No, it didn't. It made it smarter. Smart cats live. Dumb cats die. Curiosity is a good thing. And so, right away, there's a message, right? Stop asking questions and don't be so curious. Shouldn't you have an inquisitive mind? I mean, shouldn't you wonder about, and I don't know if you've wondered about this, but I remember when I was a kid, I was walking down the driveway with my mother. I remember this distinctly. I don't know why I remember this, but I do. I looked up and I asked her, why is the sky blue? I really wanted to know. I've always been curious. I mean, last year, Lynn and I have a place in Cabo San Lucas, and we go a couple times a year. And we're looking at this huge resort that has been built a few hundred yards, about half a mile maybe. I don't know, I didn't measure it, but it's down the beach. So we're walking on the beach, and there's this beautiful new resort, and then we see a woman out there at this little kiosk, this podium. So we walk up and we introduce ourselves, and she introduced, anyway, we schedule a tour. We go back, we're looking at a beautiful, incredibly beautiful structure. And so we're walking through it, and it's concrete. And there's concrete planter here and a concrete planter there, and they've got this beautiful foliage, and they've done their best to green up this huge, beautiful, stunning, architecturally stunning piece of property. It's triangular boxes on top of triangular boxes set at angles, and there's lots of glass and stone, and it's on the beach, and it's stunning. If you appreciate architecture, it's a stunning piece of work. Salaz is the name of the place. Anyway, we're walking through there, and out of my mouth, it comes out, and I ask the one person who's showing us around, I go, the thing is full of dirt. And I go, how deep is that dirt? Now, where does that question come from? I don't know. It comes from my innate desire to understand how things work. Why is this here? What does it do? How does it work? I remember when I was a child, I don't know how old I was because I didn't count the years back then, but I was probably 8 or 10 maybe, and my parents got us my brother and I, these toys and I'm pretty sure it was Christmas. The toy was called Mr. Machine. It was very cool. It was a little character, plastic man, plastic human, presumably a male or female. It's a plastic human. It was about this tall in shape of a human being. And it was really cool because you could wind it up and you could see right through it. It was all totally clear plastic. And you could watch, and you wind it up and it would walk. And you could watch the gears working as it walked along the floor. And I was just mesmerized by this. And I'm staring at those gears, and I'm looking at these wheels, and Anyway, I've got to know how it works, right? So I take it apart. Like, whoa, what does this do? What does that do? What? Of course, my left brain wasn't developed enough to put it back together. I think it ultimately ended up in the trash bin because by that point I had rendered the thing totally useless. And I've been doing that most of my life. I have no idea, you know. And then, you know, as I got into school, and time went by, I got punished for making mistakes. And it was like Bucky used to say, you were born a genius and meant to be an incredible success until you're sent to school where they de-genius you. And so we call this memorization of facts, figures, and statistics. We call the person who can memorize the both of those smart. And the person who fumbles and bumbles around and messes things up and makes piles of mistakes, we call them stupid, ignorant, or the F student. And so I did my best to knock this curiosity out of me, but I rebelled. I'm still curious, and I'm asking questions oftentimes. And I've found over the years that the biggest obstacle to learning was ego. And when I got too egotistical, or I thought I knew the answers, it generally led to some kind of misfortune. So I've learned I was right in the first place, that I should be curious. I should ask more questions, because it's not the answers, as I've been taught, it's not the answers that are important. It's the questions. And I learned a lot of this from my dear friend Bill Shopoff. That boy, he is more curious. I mean, he's curious about everything. And he's a great friend and a great model, and I've learned a lot about how to stay curious. And so, with all this stuff going on in the world, I'm still curious. My curiosity is, what in the world is really going on? And why? And how? And this country of America, with all its opulence and abundance, and talk about a great standard of living. I mean, the average individual lives greater than the kings and queens, royalty of the world, lives better than they did a mere century ago. Our standard of living just incredible. I mean, we totally control our environment, right? I mean, too cold, flip a switch, heat comes on. Too hot, flip a switch, cold air blows. We have cheap, abundant electricity. We have products, goods, and services I didn't even know I needed. I don't know why my eyes are watering, but they are. So I remain curious in this country that we live in, that I feel so, because I don't know if you've traveled, but I've been fortunate to travel to other countries, and a lot of countries live in want, lack, limitation, and need. There's not this abundance of infrastructure, this huge, beautiful roads, and bad water goes out, and good, clean water comes in, and huge abundance of electricity. Things are lit, and it's clean, and it's beautiful, and it's manicured, it's well kept. And it's just incredible what we have, and our social services, and our emergency responders. I mean, you dial 911, they're here. In a heartbeat, they show up. You don't have to memorize a number. If you have a fire, you dial 911, they show up. Excuse me, get out of the way, Wayne, we got this. Let's put the fire out. Same number for police, same number, they show up. They're doing what they love, helping other people. It's incredible. The standard of living that we as Americans enjoy. I don't know about you, but I'm enjoying it immensely. But I've been to other countries that don't have it. So I'm thankful and I'm grateful, and I remain curious. Why in this world of abundance, this country of abundance, why do we have people still living in poverty? Why do they live want, lack, limitation, and need? And why are they out there rioting and burning stuff down? I know, race. It's not about race. I don't think that's it. So I'm looking. I'm curious. I want to know. I just want more answers. Now, what in the world? So I want to introduce, so that's an introduction to myself. Born curious, most of my life curious. I'm going to remain curious. And a lot of the questions that I have were answered by studying one of my mentors. I never met Bucky. He died in 1983. R. Buckminster Fuller is his full name, but he was called Bucky. Bucky has more accolades after his name than any American in history, yet very few people have heard of him. So I'm going to do something I've been advised to never do. That's read to you. I know you know how to read. And I fired a few instructors because they were reading to other adults. I'm like, hey, dude, they know how to read. I told you, get out of here. But so don't fire me, okay? You can just turn me off. But this book was found on his desk after his death. I'm going to read his adjuvant, Kiyoshi Kuromiya was the adjuvant who finished the book. And he worked on Bucky's book just before this, Critical Path. So I'm going to introduce the book, and I'm going to read to you out of it. I'm going to do my best to understand what Bucky was trying to understand, which is, why are we here on planet Earth? Have you ever thought about this? Have you wondered why you were here? I think about it all the time. I'm like, am I supposed to be doing something? Well, what are we told to do? Go earn a living. You got to earn a living. I have to earn a living? Yeah, you got to earn a living. Get a job. Work hard. For money. Do as you're told. Stop being so bloody curious all the time. Asking all those dumb questions. Shut up and go get a job. And then I learned about procession. And we talked about procession in the previous session. So when I learned about procession, I went, that makes total sense to me. So I'll introduce Bucky. Bucky was born into a fairly well-to-do family, and he was kicked out of Harvard twice for being too curious. No, for misbehaving. And then at the age of 27, he broke a promise to his daughter, and when returning home and apologizing, she died in his arms. At that point, she died in his arms. At that point, he decided to commit suicide. So he was walking down they lived in Chicago. He and his wife, Ann Hewlett of Hewlett-Packard, lived in Chicago in a little apartment. And he decided the decision was that his life what kind of father would break a promise to his daughter and that she die in his arms? And so he decided that his life was useless. And so he decided he would go down to the shores of Lake Michigan, swim out as far as he could, and commit suicide, and allow his wife and the daughter coming up behind her. The first daughter was Alexandra. Second one, Allegra. Just let Allegra and Ann have the insurance money. I'm worthless. I'm useless. I'm of no good to anybody. I'm just going to kill myself. And so he was standing, and he writes about it later. He was standing on the beach, and he hears this loud clap of thunder. It comes out of nowhere. And the voice he hears, not if this happened or not, I wasn't there, but this is what he writes about. The voice says, you do not belong to you. You belong to the universe. And you may assume you are fulfilling your role if you convert your experiences to the highest advantage of others. It says, from that point on, I realized I was about to make a decision, and I really had never had an original thought in my entire life. But I better think about this one. And then I realized, he writes, and this is not word for words, I'm paraphrasing, so please don't quote me. He writes about that he had been parroting words other people said to him. They would say it, he'd repeat it. They would say it, he'd repeat it. He said, it's time, I better think about this. And then he made the decision. I'm not going to commit suicide. I'm going to commit the rest of my life to my fellow human beings. I'm not going to earn a living because I don't have to earn the right to be here. Everyone arrived here with a gift. Something valuable, something special to offer the fellow human beings. But we've been taught to sell our body, mind, and spirit for a paycheck, to earn a living, because we have to earn the right to be here. So I'm not going to do that. If I'm going to commit myself to my fellow human beings, I'm going to design artifacts that will raise the standard of living for all human beings on planet Earth. Not things that will just make myself and a few corporations rich. And if the universe wants this is where it gets weird, I get it. If the universe wants, if I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, I believe the universe will support me. And he lived like that for over 50 years. His trust, his faith was so strong, he survived for over 50 years. He wrote 21 or 22 books, circumnavigated the world 42 times. And he said, I will never speak unless I'm asked to speak, but I'm not going to speak anymore. I'm going to go home and I'm going to figure out what I want to say. Words are the most powerful tools humans have. And from now on, when I use them, I'm going to use them wisely. And I'm not going to speak until I know exactly what sound I want to make. His silence lasted for almost 2 years. So I met his daughter Allegra in 1995, an event that they were doing in San Diego to honor and celebrate Bucky's birth and death. And I met Allegra there, and I was fortunate enough to speak to her. I said, what was it like living with him? She said it was the most incredible thing. He would sit at a table with these dried peas and these toothpicks, and he would just build these models. And he had models all over the house. This model and that model. And so that's what he was building. And when people would argue with him, he would say, don't argue with me. There's the model. Argue with the model. And the main thing he discovered, he said, I don't care about man's laws. I care about nature's laws and how to apply them. What are the laws of nature? What do humans function in the universe? What is the design of science? Why are we here? What are we supposed to be doing? And so these questions really intrigued me. I thought, I've had the same questions. Maybe I should read the book. So that's Bucky, and here's the book. And this is a note from the adjuvant. On the day that R. Buckminster Fuller died at age 87 in 1983, I had found the entire cosmography, and that's the name of the book, Cosmography. I found the entire cosmography manuscript, which we had been working on, neatly stacked in the middle of an uncharacteristically tidy desk in his study at his Pacific Palisades, California home. Atop the manuscript was a note addressed to his daughter Allegra and his grandson Jamie and granddaughter Alexandra. It began, as something happens to me and I should die suddenly, I want you to know of the extraordinary importance of my now being written book, Cosmography. The book and its organization and contents were conceived as a whole and nurtured through to virtual completion by Fuller during his last 4 years of his life. All of the vocabulary and concepts originate in Fuller's mind, and the way they are phrased is his. I have served as an adjuvant, a term Fuller borrowed from medicine, specifically immunology, in 1980 to designate my role in writing of Critical Path, that of a helper, in transcribing and editorially refining for publication his ideas, words, and extemporaneous thinking out loud. In Cosmography, as in Critical Path, I have served in this Fuller design role to preserve the idiosyncratic concepts, tone, syntax, and phraseology of Fuller, preparing the manuscript for publication. It has strayed, if it has strayed at all, from his original conception, the blame is mine. It is a faithful representation of his methodology and thought. The credit goes to him and his insistent and uncompromising resoluteness. I have not attempted to flesh out those few parts of the book that Fuller left unfinished. I hope the reader will patiently bear with us as many have during the 8 years that have passed between Fuller's death and the publication of this long-awaited final book. Fuller would perhaps attribute this span of time to nature's own purposeful system of gestation rates. And this is the reason that I'm reading and going over this book with you now. It's the first and last sentence that caught my eye. Cosmography. Here's the first sentence. The dark ages still reign over all humanity, and the depth and persistence of this domination are only now becoming clear. Here's the last sentence. Dear reader, traditional human power structures and their reign of darkness are about to be rendered obsolete. I read those, I look around, and I realize that we're in this largest, most incredible paradigm shift that I've seen so far in my lifetime. And the future is not an extension of the present. We're going into a whole new era now. So this is what he writes. Some of this is technical, but I love the way he goes into the technical minutia of a plant and how it operates and how that applies to humans and what our role may be. So I'm not going to try to explain this book. I probably shouldn't be reading a technical manuscript to you, but I'm going to, and hopefully you'll get something out of it, as I have so far. The Dark Ages prison has no steel bars, chains, or locks. Instead, it is locked by misorientation and built of misinformation. Caught up in a plethora of conditioned reflexes and driven by the human ego, both warden and prisoner attempt meagerly to compete with God. All are intractably skeptical of what they do not understand. We are powerfully imprisoned in these dark ages simply by the terms in which we have been conditioned to think. Some concepts have been long imagined by humans to be real, up and down. This is what he was saying. Our whole vocabulary is based on the fact that the world was flat. He said it's up and down. You can't have up and down on a sphere. It's in and out. This is the terminology astronauts and pilots use. They come coming in for a landing. There's no such thing, he said, up and down. Straight lines that extend to infinity. He said there's no such thing as a straight line. Measurements based on squares and cubes. He also says there's no such thing as a solid. Most of what we've been taught isn't true, but the libraries are full of authentic information. We've been teaching that way for decades, so I guess we'll just continue. For ages, humans have mistakenly thought that solids were truly solid and that several lines could conceivably pass through the same point at the same time. Humans have deceived themselves that the existence of 1, 2, and 3 dimensions is independently demonstrable and that there is factual evidence proving the existence of more than one race of human beings. I'm going to read that again. Humans have deceived themselves that the existence of 1, 2, and 3 dimensions is independently demonstrable and that there is factual evidence proving the existence of more than one race of human beings. And further, humans attest to believe in God, although only paying him once a week lip service in an otherwise human, male-dominated universe. Former religions have been organized to attend to the otherwise inconvenient, consistent recognition of God, while humanity gives 6/7 of its time rendering service to exclusively selfish dictates of human power structures. Misorientation, wrong beliefs, and conditioned fixations are escapable only when that which is physically and metaphysically true becomes experimentally provable and comprehensible. The untrue is rendered spontaneously obsolete only by the demonstration of that which is true. It is here that I am compelled to begin. The only important fact about me as I write this book is that I am an average, healthy human being. There's nothing that I have done could not have been done equally well or better by any other healthy human being, given the unique working circumstances under which I have operated for the last 55 years. This book presents my individual efforts to escape from the clutches of the Dark Ages, but in a larger sense, it shows the beginnings of our species' epochal rebirth, what I call the dawn of Einstein's universe. As an average, healthy human being, I've learned how little we know about ourselves. For instance, why are we humans included in the design of the universe? How is the designing of eternally regenerative universe both anticipatorily and progressively conceived and realized, together with the part already played and is yet to be played by humans? I'm sure that the only reason I'm widely known is because in 1927, when I was 32, I decided to make an experiment of myself. The experiment sought to discover and realize what would happen if a healthy, moneyless, unknown individual with dependent wife and newborn child altogether discarded the assumption that an honorable human being must earn the right of family and self to live, earn a living, and to do so to the satisfaction of the socio-economic power structure governing the political system in which he lived, and breaking away from all socially accepted concepts of the significance of human presence on planet Earth, undertook to discover what, if anything, a mature individual might be able to do effectively on behalf of all humanity that would be inherently impossible of accomplishment by any political system, nation, or private enterprise corporation, no matter how powerful or well endowed. Wow. Because A, I had no competition in such an initiative, and B, the experiment has been so richly productive, I have come to be widely known. If there had been any competitors, you would probably never have heard of me. If there had been competitors, I would long ago have dropped out, leaving the task to the competence of my competition. I initiated that which I did only because I was convinced that it needed to be done. And to the best of my knowledge, no one else was attempting to do it. I was 32 years old. In the year I was born, the life insurance company's actuarial tables showed that life expectancy was 42 years for white males born in New England. Being 32, it was my feeling that I had only 10 years left with which to carry out my experiment. I realized even then that I would get nowhere by asking the 3 billion humans then on planet Earth to listen to me, let alone support me. As a rule, I found that people listen only when they ask you to speak to them. It seemed clear to me that the only possible way I could become effective would be by doing what I did on a scale all out of proportions to what one would imagine possible for a mere individual. First, it would have to be done on behalf of all humanity. And second, it would have to take advantage of the human mind's capability to discover the generalized principles. These generalized principles govern the operation of our physical universe. These generalized principles govern the operation of our physical universe. I set out to discover the entire inventory of generalized, only mathematically expressible scientific principles that had thus far in history been discovered by humans. So I'm not concerned with man's laws. I'm concerned with nature's laws and how to apply them. Third, I surmise that I must employ those principles to develop artifacts that would render the living environment more favorable for all humans and their supportive ecology. The role of human mind, invention, and tools in the relentless course of human cosmic evolution became quite clear to me. My hope was that the development of this more favorable physical environment would bring about such a reduction of physical disadvantage to humanity that individuals with vastly greater knowledge of their technological options would become principally concerned with unselfish goals. The realization of potential advantages for all humanity to be attained only by an artifact revolution. I'm going to read that again. My hope was that the development of this more favorable physical environment would bring about such a reduction of physical disadvantage to humanity that individuals with vastly greater knowledge of their technological options would become principally concerned with unselfish goals, the realization of potential advantage for all humanity to be attained only by an artifact revolution. He started building artifacts that had never been built before, and this is what he would say. Don't argue with me. It's not an opinion. It's not a theory. It's a fact. There's the model. I built it. Argue with the artifact, which I thought was smart. Ultimately, I hope that competition for limited resources would be ended and thus root the cause for war. Ultimately, I hope that the competition for limited resources would be ended and thus the root cause for war. Perhaps on some level, expressed or unexpressed, similar motivation drives all those who set out to discover and invent. Over a half century ago, when I embarked on my experiment and individual initiative, I set before myself, as I have repeatedly ever since then, one very large question. What is our human function here in universe? My first answer to that question came from three closely related observations. One, that all known living organisms, other than humans, have some integral body equipment that gives them special operating capabilities in special environments. Two, that many creatures, including humans, have brains, and that brains are always and only sorting the information reported by the senses and integrating this information into system images and therewith coordinating nervous control responses or forming improved new system imaginings. Brains are therefore always dealing with special case experience. For example, this one smells a little sweeter than that one. Brains must sleep periodically. Brains deal in beginnings and endings of special case considerations. Brains are physical, temporal, and frequently terminal. 3. Humans have a faculty unidentified with any other creatures, the faculty of mind. Minds are always and only concerned with the discovery of eternal, constant interrelationships manifest in a myriad of special case experiences of the brain, which interrelationships are not to be found in any one of the special case system components considered separately. This is why it takes a group. I'm going to read that last sentence again. Minds are always and only concerned with the discovery of eternal, constant interrelationship. We're looking for relationships, patterns, and trends. Brains don't do that. Minds do that. We have minds which animals don't have. We have the ability to think, to see patterns, to see trends, and to solve problems. One of the most important events of classical science involving the interrelationship findings by the human mind is demonstrated by the mathematician astronomer Johannes Kepler, whose story I shall recount here. So he's giving us an example now of how the mind works as opposed to just having a brain. Based on his accurate observation and measurements, Kepler found that all the planets of which he was aware, seemed to be utterly disordered. He then said they did share one thing, the fact of all going around the sun. As a mathematician, he knew he could assign these planets something else in common. He also knew that given two known constants, one may discover other interrelationships within the team. Kepler then assigned a common constant to each and all the known planets, exactly the same increment of calendar time. Starting at the same moment in calendar time and finishing at the same moment of calendar time, Kepler observed and recorded the planet's concurrent orbital travel over a 21-day period. This gave him the data for graphing the slices of pie-shaped triangle-formed patterns by starting and finishing radii of the measured distance from the sun to each planet at the start and finish of the 21-day event. The arc of travel between the start and finish closed the radii ends to form triangular shapes. Kepler intuitively decided to calculate the area of each of them. Doing so, he found that they were not only similar areas, but were elegantly, exactly the same size. He surmised that the planets could not sweep out exactly the same cosmic areas unless they were coordinating in some exact manner. Since the planets were not touching one another, they could not be coordinating like toothed gears. Far from touching, these massive bodies were rotating and orbiting millions of miles distant from one another. Kepler was forced to conclude that there was invisible, unsmellable, soundless, untouchable, intertensionally restraining force governing these planets' orbital motions. The work and findings of Kepler's contemporary Galileo regarding the exact mathematical rate of acceleration of falling bodies led to Isaac Newton's discovering the mathematical expression of the gravitational laws of the universe. Newton found that the interactions of any two celestial bodies varies inversely with the second power of the arithmetical distances intervening, thus half the distance and increase the attractiveness fourfold. When you cut the distance in half, you increase the attractiveness by 4. Here again, we have human mind discovering what the brain's sensing is utterly incapable of apprehending. The mind can and does, from time to time, discover the only mathematically expressible laws governing these non-sensorially discoverable macro-microcosmic interrelationships, which always hold true in all special case instances. When such initial discoveries are found to be exceptionless, they became known as laws. Hence, the generalized laws of science. And these are what Bucky went out to discover. Exceptionlessness can be termed eternal. Human mind has discovered a meager inventory of those mathematically stable, eternal laws governing the physical design and operation of the universe. These laws have never been found to contradict one another. All have been found to be interaccommodative. All of them may be objectively employed in special case technology. Humans possessed of the family of generalized mathematical laws governing all the relevant variable factors in aerodynamics are able to build a flying machine by which they can outfly birds in speed and altitude. Humans can lend one another their wings. Humans alone of all known phenomena have access to the great design laws of the universe immediately implies that we must have been introduced into the universe for some very significant ultimate functioning. I realized that humans must have been given their extraordinary minds in order to discover principles, the conceptual comprehension of which permits invention and development of instruments and tools. With these instruments and tools, we can explore our immediate senses apprehending environment as well as our vast outward macrocosmic instrument reachings and exquisite inward microcosmic penetratings of our locally experienced scenario universe. In 1923, E.P. Hubble discovered another galaxy. Between that event and November 1982, astronomers using new radio telescopes were able to see through the great dust clouds of our Milky Way and discover 100 billion additional galaxies. The accelerating rate and increase of acquisition of ever more exact macro and micro information seems beyond comprehension. Only by such non-sensorially apprehended macro-micro experience-obtained information do we discover ever new challenges to our unique problem-solving capability as provided for our eternal principles discovering and comprehending minds. So we're able to solve more and more problems with all this new information. Another of the concepts leading to my discovery of a logical answer to why humans are included in the design of the universe is illustrated by the following example. In the forward cockpit of a Boeing 747 and all other air transports, there are an enormous number of computer-activated instruments. In flight, these instruments are constantly and exactly reporting all of the thus far known to exist and knowable critical conditions operating throughout the airplane's power plant, airframe, landing gear, etc. This suggested to me the following, that through all those instruments his cockpit team is monitoring, the captain of the Boeing 747 is apprehending in flight all of the airplane's locally critical information, and through all the captain's total experience and his information integrating brain and his physical principle comprehending mind, he is serving not only as the ship's comprehensive information harvester and integrator, but also as the ship's constant comprehensive local problem solver and maintenance of the integrity not only of the airplane and its passengers, but also of local universe and thereby of eternally regenerative universe. From this model, I made the following working assumptions. Since it is only through our ability to use mind-discovered cosmic principles and the therefrom developed instruments that we gain information, no matter how many more human mind performable cosmic scale functions we may in time discover ourselves capable of coping with, it seems to be confirmed that the cosmic functions of humans is indeed analogous to that of the captain of the Boeing 747, together with its pilots, engineers, and their galaxy of instruments. They, as we humans, are here for local information gathering and local universe problem solving in support of the integrity of eternally regenerative universe. What is common to all humans in all history is problems, problems, and more problems. If you are good at solving problems, you do not eventually arrive at utopia. You get even more difficult, more comprehensive, more incisively stated problems to solve. What's the reward for solving a problem? Bigger one. By great good fortune, we have progressively greater access to the comprehensive design principles of the universe with which to solve these problems. It is undeniable that we humans have this local universe function. It is reasonable to assume that is why we are here. It seemed to be a very good working assumption. It has served me well for the last half century. In order to avoid rousing the fears and consequent active opposition of the powerful financial, religious, and political interests who might foresee in my artifacts revolution of obsolescence of their own profitable products or services, I deliberately designed far into the future. Interesting, huh? I'm going to read it again. In order to avoid rousing the fears and consequent active opposition of the powerful financial, religious, and political interests who might foresee in my artifacts revolution the obsolescence of their own profitable products or services. So he figured if the political, religious, and financial leaders saw his artifacts, saw the value, saw what they could do, and it would make what they were doing obsolete, they would come after him. I deliberately designed far into the future. I confined my complex of omni-intercomplementary artifact designing to function only within a socio-economic era so many technological evolutional stages further ahead in the future as to render the only synergetically effective interfunctioning of the many seemingly uninterrelated artifacts entirely unanticipatable by the over-specialized viewpoints of the pre-1929 economic world's most astute masters or of their most far-sighted advisors. So he put it so far out there, nobody would believe it would ever happen, so they ignored him. For instance, who in 1927 could foresee the intercomplementation of my various inventions, the cartographic projections of the world, my one-piece stampable bathrooms, my synergetic geometry, or my air-deliverable mast suspended dwelling machines? Careful study of my anticipatory strategy for avoiding the incumbent world power structure's opposition to my only in distant time integratable artifact revolution placed the era for such safely immunized practical realization of a sustainable high standard of living for all earthly and human beings as beginning somewhere between 1980 and 1990. The latter was a date by which my design sciences comprehensive inventory of artifacts specifying and schematic inventing could be completed as initiated, organized, and maintained only by a single individual, demonstrating what happens when one invents always and only with total human in mind, along with total physical resources of planet Earth and the totally cumulative techno-science know-how, know-what, and know-when of all human history. So he's going, I think he's saying here, it only works when you do it for the good of humanity. In production management, there is a fundamental order of lags, i.e. invention to use gestation period. So he's talking about lag here. So you know what lag is. Lag is a difference in time between inception and information of an idea. If you look up in the sky, you'll see a lot of stars. A lot of them burned out. They don't exist anymore. But the light, they're so far away, the light is still coming. The light's in lag. If you see a tennis player hit the ball, by the time they hit it to the other side, sees it and hits it back, it's in lag. If you watch football, the distance in time between the quarterback throws the ball to the receiver catches it, the ball is in lag. So what he's talking about is lag, timing, and gestation periods, which relates directly to the velocities operative in a respective phenomenon. Consider, the slower the action, the longer the lag. In electromagnetics, whereby the velocity is 700 million miles per hour, there's a lag of only a few months between invention and industrial use. In the astro-aeronautical arts, where the velocities range from a few hundred to a few thousand miles per hour, there's an average of 5-year lag between invention and practical industrial production use. In the automobile industry, where the average velocity is only 60 miles an hour, there's a 10-year lag between invention and industrial use. In the skyscraper building arts, where the highest velocity of motion is that of the completed structure's rate of heat and cold caused expansion and contraction and yieldings to hurricanes, which is measured in mere inches and fractions of an inch, the invention to production lag is a quarter of a century. So he says that electromagnetics, the lag is a few months. Automobiles, it's 10 years. Astro-aeronautical, it's 5 years. In building, it's 25 years. In education, it's 50 years. So their education is 50 years behind. A quarter of a century. Production technology, single-family dwellings, which are relatively immobile. There's a 50-year lag between invention and use. Same as in education. It's true, right? We're still in the agrarian age. Why do we let people out? Why do we let kids out in the summer? Why do kids leave school in the summer? go home to harvest the crops. It goes all the way back to the agrarian age. So we had agrarian age, then we went to industrial age, then we went through the information age. Now we're going to digital, and now we're going into a whole new age. So he's talking about timing, gestation, and lag rates. The anticipated 50-year lag in the gestation of single-family living technology happened to coincide neatly with the 50-year minimum immunization period I adopted in 1927 to avoid the incumbent power structure's anticipatory opposition to the artifact revolution. When I say artifact, I mean any participation using the principles of nature to reassociate these principles for a specific purpose. Nature, for example, does this. She takes her own rocks apart. Nature is ceaselessly transforming. The methodology of my artifact revolutions is quite simple. Taking nature's cue, I determined I must commit myself to solving problems by artifacts, what I call reforming the environment rather than trying to reform human behaviors. The function of what I call design science is to solve problems by introducing into the environment new artifacts, the availability of which will induce their spontaneous employment by humans and thus, coincidentally, cause humans to abandon their previous problem-solving behaviors and devices. For example, when humans have a vital need to cross the roaring rapids of a river, as a design scientist, I would design them a bridge, causing them, I am sure, to abandon spontaneously and forever the risking of their lives by trying to swim to the other shore. Having committed myself to developing artifacts which would reform physical circumstances instead of trying to reform human customs and the socio-economic political system, I faced another problem. It was obvious that to be realized, these physical artifacts were going to require costly materials, skilled craftsmanship, energy, and all kinds of tools and workshops. Since I was penniless, the number one question was, how can I undertake such a 50-year world-embracing commitment with little to no money? The logical answer to that question evolved in the following manner. First, I was deeply impressed with what my scientific training had taught me regarding ecology and the fact that a great deal of energy was required to produce and sustain biological life on our planet. Second, it was apparent to me that human beings must have some very important function to perform on planet Earth and in the universe, as I have already described. The function and human organisms which perform it require much energy. The sun is planet Earth's greatest source of energy. However, human beings, being mammals, cannot acquire this life-sustaining energy through sunbathing. Solar energy must be gotten indirectly. The planet Earth's botanicals convert the random disorderly entropy radiation received from the stars, primarily the sun, and then angularly rearrange divergent radiation in convergent patterns with beautifully ordered centropic, atomic, and molecular structures. Hydrocarbon molecules used by all discrete botanical species, in other words, crops, food that grow plants. The principle of similitude, or relative size advantage, also motivated bankers to amass capital by employing the funds banked with them, the unwitting depositors, to achieve the vast magnitude of resources required to take advantage of similitude, doubling the length of their ships. And I skipped a little bit ahead because I want to end with this sentence. The person who invented and produced the keel and rib rowing boat, though possessed of the knowledge of the principles involved, never had sufficient capital to build the big ships. Then as now, profits derived from ingenuity of investors was realized only by the owners of mass capital. So now he goes into what are nature's rules? How do we survive? Where does the energy come from? What are the laws? How do we apply them? and what is our role on planet Earth and in the universe. So it goes into generalized, scientifically verifiable principles. So I'm on page 9 of Cosmography. And we're just about out of time. Hopefully I haven't bored you to tears. If you're interested, I'm going to go into this book because I think it's worth going into. I think it's timely. I think it's relevant. And I'm on this unending quest to figure out why I'm here. What am I supposed to be doing? So if you're interested, I'll see you next Wednesday. Wednesdays with Wayne. Thank you, Facebook, for allowing us to do this free of charge. Thank you for the Real Estate Business School. And thank you all for your time. Again, the book is Cosmography. It's readily available. A lot of his books aren't, but this one is. And if you want, you can start reading it. Now you know what we're going to do next Wednesday. We're going to pick up on page 9, generalized, scientifically verifiable principles. So just as in closing, I will say this. When I started applying the principle of precession, it was 1989. So I went to Money New with Robert Kiyosaki in 1987. My wife Lynn had gone away for the weekend to the seminar. She went and did one event a year. She believed in continuing her education. So, of course, I was so cocky and arrogant, obnoxious. I don't even know why she hung around me, but I found out later she described me as a fixer-upper. Her sister said, "You should get rid of him. He's a loser." She says, "I know a fixer-upper when I see one." That's the real estate investor in her. Nonetheless, she came home and she said, "You should go to this course. It's pretty good." So I said, "Oh, no, I meant go." She goes, "You don't have to go, but either you go or you go." So I said, "Yeah, go or I go?" She goes, "Yeah, you got it." I said, "Okay, sounds like I'm going." So I went. And I met Robert, and I went into a training program. Again, fortune struck. So people call it coincidence that I moved to Austin. Coincidence I met Lynn. Coincidence I met Robert. I believe it's all via design. Coincidence I met Bucky, and I met him personally, was introduced to his work. I think it's all via design. Nonetheless, I went to a 2-year training program. I was broke at the time. I lost my business in Houston, divorced. I was a mess. I had no money and no prospects. And Robert called and said, "We need you in Sydney in 2 weeks." And I said, "Robert, I don't have any money. I'm broke. I'm in 3 months behind on a $750 mortgage." He says, "Yeah, that's just like you, Wayne. You've always got some reason. I'll be in Sydney in 2 weeks. You're invited. It's your choice." Click. So Lynn and I sat across the breakfast table, and we're crying our eyes out. And we were so distraught, upset, frustrated, confused. Do we go for money? Do we follow Bucky? Is it a cult? Are we crazy? Are we nuts? Are we right? Are we wrong? I don't know. And then what Bucky says came true. He says he jumped off the cliff with no parachute and discovered there was a God. And the universe supported him. And he lived like that for over 50 years. So I said to him, I said, "You know what? I'm going to jump and we'll try it. But if it doesn't work out..." So that's what we did. It was 1989. Lynn and I grabbed hands and we jumped off the cliff with no parachute. And the amount of money and the support we needed showed up. Just the amount we needed, right when we needed it. It's been that way since then. Wednesdays with Wayne. See you next Wednesday. Enjoy your day, enjoy your week, and remember 2 things. You were born a genius, and you're meant to be an incredible success. You're a writer with a gift, something to offer your fellow human beings. If you do what you're supposed to be doing, the universe will take care of you. Let's go out and make it a better world. See you next week. Bye.